Beware, don't sell fake UTME forms. Senate resumes to deliberate on 2017 budget. Southern Kaduna killings. Arrest Khan president and others now. Kaduna Islamic leaders to federal government. And on page 11 in greater detail is the headline. Thailand, one step closer to approving death penalty for corrupt politicians. And SON, that's Standards Organization of Nigeria, arrests 2 Chinese over fake importation of mobile phones. Very quickly, from page 7 of the Nigerian pilot, you can see that on the screen now, but it says, Edo gets family caught 10 years after domesticating Child Rights Act. Now, this will be a court that has exclusive jurisdiction on matters relating to children in both civil and criminal aspects. The court was inaugurated yesterday. Listen.
Yes, there's some other pocket of stories on the front page of the blueprints, just below the photograph you have there. As you might have heard in the news, the federal government sacks FRN's scribe. So that's the aviation agencies, their bosses too. There were some changes that were made. You find a story on page 32. And pervasive poverty in Kogi, EPA urges governor. You find a story on page 5. Army warns on terrorists' new trend. What are those new trends? Page 9 will offer you details. FHC, that's the Federal High Court, I think Kingston took that story earlier, redeploys Abang, Liman, as well as 9 others. You find that story on page 7. Niger declares 3-day mourning for ex-governor Kure. Quickly now to the Daily Trust. Some other stories you find just below the plate. You have 2019. PDP governor declares support for President Buhari. Who is this PDP governor? Find out on page 36. Federal government appoints heads of 4 aviation agencies. Page 3 will lead you into greater details for that particular story.
Yes, there was an announcement for 4 agencies in the aviation industry. These are Nigerian Airspace Management Agency, NAMA, the Nigeria Meteorological Agency, the Nigeria College of Aviation, Zaria, and the Accident Investigation Bureau. 2 others retained their position. Also talking about appointments, Mr. Daniel Asapo-Kai has replaced Jim Obaze as the Executive Secretary of the Financial Council Reporting Council. You recall that in the past few days there have been action taken by Reporting Council would led to the headship of some churches and NGOs being replaced. Meanwhile, Mr. Adiduku Sulaiman has also been appointed as the chairman of the Reporting Council. Meanwhile, the 19 ministries, departments, and agencies and the private sector that are specified in the law are to nominate their members to constitute the board of the FRSC. Talking about the report from Southern Kaduna, which Kingsley read, the Council of Imams and Ulama in Kaduna has called on the federal government to arrest and prosecute those who exacerbate crisis in Southern Kaduna by inflammatory statements that tend to fuel the crisis. The chairman of that association, Sheikh Abubakar Babatunde, and the secretary, Aminu Ibrahim, have both said that inflammatory utterances by political and religious leaders had led to the massacre of Hausa Fulani in that area. They blame the senator and the member of the House of Rep from that area, as well as official of Christian Association of Nigeria and other official of Southern Kaduna People's Union for encouraging the killings in the area. They cited several newspaper publications which they say were in fact false, which has whipped up sentiments and has increased the rate of killings there. They also say that government failure to punish persons found to have perpetrated religious crisis as far back as 2001 and the election violence in 2011, for which judicial commissions of inquiry and the investigative panel were appointed, has become the sore thumb and is causing, because there are no deterrent for those who created the crisis, and that government has to do something about checking the excesses of the leaders there.
All right, Bayo, let's take the headlines very quickly from the Leadership newspaper. Leadership, below the name flag, has 2 headlines, 3 headlines actually before the lead. CBN releases 7.29 billion naira agri funds to 55,474 beneficiaries. PDP crisis will accept appeal court ruling. That's according to Sheriff. Details of that story on page 16. House tackles federal government over 5,000 naira stipend and demands legal framework. That's on page 80, greater detail. Couriers remains arrived today, burial in Mina tomorrow. Niger State government sends delegation to Germany. President Buhari, Abdulsalami Saraki, ACF, others mourn. And then you also have beneath the photograph on the front page, the Gambia. ECOWAS raises the alarm over mass emigration. Details of that story can be found on page 7. Now, I was just going to say, Bayo, you know, there were some reports yesterday. We haven't seen them in the papers today.
Yes.
Apparently, because it's not been provided, the information has not been given in greater detail. Some allegation that the Code of Corporate Governance had also been suspended, along with the removal of the executive secretary. I don't think I've seen that in the papers, because it's a very significant development, because it impacts almost immediately on quoted companies, as well as the reporting obligations of these entities.
You're right. I think it's the Federal Ministry of Trade and Investment that actually said they have suspended the Corporate Governance Code of the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria. This is to allow a detailed review and extensive consultation with stakeholders. So you're right, it's been there. The other story too that may have been misrepresented in the media is that it's tend to create an impression that the UN has uncovered 400 fresh graves. Actually, it was a report detailing how the UN have found out that children have unfortunately died from instances of hunger and disease in that area. This was a report about RAN in Kalabalgi local government area. It's a 10-page report that is detailing the critical, described it as Nigeria Emergency Situation Report. It was written between 15th of December and 6th of January. And so it is calling for immediate assistance for Nigeria, particularly relating to the condition of the internally displaced persons.
All right, Bayo Tobe, we'd like to thank you for being with us today. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Tomorrow will be another day.
All right. Good morning, Nigeria. Still on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with the movements in the Nigerian labor movement, namely the creation of a new labor center.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Okay, sir. You may now go in for your interview.
Thank you. Ah, my shoe. And to think I just bought this very expensive foreign shoe 2 months ago.
So sorry about your shoes. This is why I advise my friends to always patronize made in Nigeria products. See this shoe. It's made in Nigeria and I've had it for 2 years and it's still as good as the day I bought it.
Made in Nigeria products are good quality, and stringent government regulations and certification now mean the goods made in Nigeria meet international standards. Make the patriotic choice today. Buy right. Buy made in Nigeria.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
So what's up, sweetheart? You really look like you're up to something.
I have a secret.
Okay.
I'll be going to Europe next week.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like you have your visa, your passport, your plane ticket?
No, not that way. Some men are helping us. We pay them, they take us through the desert, and then we cross the sea into Europe.
The desert, the sea. Isn't that the route where many have died?
Yes, it is indeed a very dangerous journey. In 2016 alone, 4,900 people died while crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe. Many were Nigerians. For the very few who survived the journey, they are forced into prostitution or other crimes just to survive. Eventually, they will be arrested and deported to Nigeria. Don't be a victim. Don't go this way.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Yes, before the break, Kingsley did tell you that we'll take a look at the movement within the Nigerian labor movement. What exactly is happening? Well, this is Good Morning Nigeria, and we're coming to you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. And to set the ball rolling for our discussion on today's edition of the program, discussing the emergence of the new labor union, implication on labor movements, is this background report put together by Omotola Omojola.
The labor movement in Nigeria has for years been synonymous to the voice of the people. Under the umbrella of the Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, the bodies in unity have been the hope of the masses in tackling unpleasant government policies. At the risk of being on the opposing side of the government, even during military regimes, the labor movement defied the odds in the interest of the public. The trade unions have always been forced to reckon with. The unpleasant aftermath of the 2015 NLC election created some level of divide within the body, bringing about the Ayuba Waba and Joe Ajero factions. This development was attributed to NLC's non-compliance with the zoning policy of the labor union, as earlier agreed to be zoned to the organized private sector, which Joe Ajero is a member. Efforts by stakeholders to intervene in the situation yielded little results, leading ultimately to the emergence of the Ajero-led United Labour Congress after getting the endorsement of 25 unions. This situation, social commentators believe, is unhealthy for the once formidable body, as it could become an exploitative channel for employers and politicians. It is worthy of note that 4 trade centers were merged into one body in 1978 to form the Nigeria Labour Congress as a sole body to represent the interests of workers. Not even the formation of the Trade Union Congress TUC in 2005, after the return to democratic governance, did much to change the harmonious working relationship between it and the NLC to champion the cause of Nigerian workers. Though the emergence of the United Labour Congress did not come to many as a surprise, it is the consequences of having multiple labour centres that many feel will not augur well for the country, going by the experience of the past when the country had 4 labour centres that were fighting more amongst themselves than promoting, protecting and leading workers' welfare and condition of service. What are the implications of the emergence of another labour centre in Nigeria? Will the centre bring anything new to the labour movement in Nigeria? He strived for power and relevance responsible for the emergence of a new labour centre. Join us on the program as experts analyze further.
All right, thank you very much there, Motola Mojola, for that background report. Now we have guests with us here in the Abuja studios as well as at our Lagos Network Center. With us here in the Abuja studio, we'd like to welcome at this time Comrade John Oda, as the former General Secretary of the Nigeria Labour Congress. Comrade John Oda, a pleasure to have you join us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and also from our Lagos studios, we have another comrade, Comrade Peter Esele, as former President, Trade Union Congress, that's TUC. Comrade Esele, a pleasure to have you on the program. Join us from Lagos.
Good morning.
All right, well, let's begin the conversation with you in Lagos. You listen to the background report, and of course, the public space is well aware of what's happening in the Nigerian labor movement. It's been the announcement of the formation of a new labor center. What does this mean, in your opinion? Are we back to the situation nearly 40 years ago, before the formation of the NLC out of 4 labor centers that the country had?
I think it's a fallout of the last NSC election, and what I always say is that water will find its level somehow. If your intention in forming a new labor center is to protect the interests of the workers, time will tell. If that is not it, I think it will also fall by the wayside.
All right, Comrade Sele. Okay, let's get the views from Comrade John Noda. This is one incident that have been seen coming in the last 2 years. It's been up and down with this internal crisis for the Labour Congress. What exactly is happening with this emergence?
Well, I think one we want to say that it's a very unfortunate development, and Nigerian workers are ultimately going to be the worst for it. And that's the reason why the veterans and others who wish this movement well have been working both behind the scene to try to bring this crisis to an end. Trying to form a new center clearly isn't it, because it is going to take us back, like Kingsley said, to the past that we thought we had overcome. I think for the benefit of Nigerians, people need to go back to where we are coming from. In 1975, the famous Akpena Declaration, when during the burial of one of the labor leaders of one of the 4 centers, the leaders came together and decided that they will form one united Nigeria Labour Congress, on the basis of which they then started preparing to put together this new body. And they actually formed the first NLC and elected a leadership. It was those who felt they had been left out of the leadership that then went and persuaded the Murtala Obasanjo administration to come and look into the affairs, internal affairs of the trade unions, that there were problems therein. So if those who are promoting the new efforts to form a center are saying they are going back to that period, they should tell Nigerians why they are doing it, and not hide behind the issue of plurality of unions as a legitimacy basis to form the union. I say this against the background of the fact that after the federal government came in the name of restructuring the nearly 1,000 house unions into 42 industrial unions, and the NSC emerged in February 1978. Workers and their leadership had been very happy with this. And throughout the period between 78 and now, anytime the International Labour Organization, we go to Geneva and the point is made that the NSC is a process that was brought together by government and that they should allow freedom of information, of association. We had always made the point that this is something that we are comfortable with. In any case, we had formed the NSC before the government came in, and it only did the reorganization, and then we came back and reclaimed our movement. Now the trend internationally is to have a merger of a number of unions so that there is strength in numbers, there is strength in bigness, in being big. And the workers of this country need to ask their leaders that we cannot therefore go back to that era where because you participated in an election and it didn't come out in your favor, you then step out and you want to form a new center. if that happens, and then it means that at every cycle of 4 years, we are going to have a new set of people wanting to form new centers. I think that the leaders of the labor movement, Hassan Sumonu, who was the first president of the NSC, and all the living presidents, Chiruma, Adams Oshomole, and those who were in the leadership right from the first leadership that was constituted in Ibadan in 1978, had tried to wade into this problem. And as a lot of progress we thought had been made before this slides back to wanting to form a new center.
All right, Comrade Order, we'll come back to get in on the perspective as to what is being done to reconcile or resolve the issue pertaining to the creation of the new center, which is not describing itself, by the way, as a faction of the NLC any longer. But let's return to Comrade Peter Esele in Lagos. Comrade Esele, the argument has been made that, I mean, you were president of the TUC, and the TUC, of course, is a center itself. So if you had a new center 12 years or so ago created, what stops other centers from coming up against the background of the provisions in Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution pertaining to freedom of association?
When people make that argument, they forget about the history of the TUC. When the Nigerian Labour Congress was founded, it was predominantly, even the senior staff were not allowed to be members of the NSC. If you find out from the TUC, what you have are senior staffs in both public and private sectors. And even the law that we're talking about plurality simply says that if you want to create a new labor center, you create a new labor center from a new industrial unions. You just don't wake up and create a new labor center from an existing one. So every industrial union that belongs to the Trade Union Congress were never members of Nigerian Labour Congress. So I think that will clarify that. What you have right now is that you are having industrial unions who are members of the Nigerian Labour Congress, leaving Nigerian Labour Congress to go and create a new labor centers. I think the law does not allow that as it is now. But I think going forward, we are all going to go into all of that to make sure that the process is followed.
When you say that the law doesn't, as it were, permit disengagement from an existing center, are industrial unions bound to remain with the NLC, for instance? That's one leg of the question. Second leg, let's back up a bit again to what happened 40 years ago. Now, there were all kinds of stories then that the labor centers that the country had were affiliated along the lines of the superpowers during the Cold War. You had those who went with the West and then those who went with the East. Do we have that situation now to, as it were, frustrate the emergence, say, of a new center?
I don't think we have that now. I don't think most of these things that you have right now is not ideological driven. And one of the concerns that I also have in the movement is that even when you get government getting in, even the registrations, there are questions being asked about it, because what I heard from my own sources was that this was done by the last administration. And even the current Minister of Labour said he's not aware of it, because before it was done, what the current minister was asking was that this was done in May 2015. And then it was gazetted in 2016. So what people were asking was, why that gap? But going forward, we are not going to ask yourself whether we are going back to 40 years ago. That's why I keep emphasizing on the need for us as labor movement to also put our house in order. We cannot all the time be having elections and our elections are cantankerous. The second term election of Abdulwahid Omar also resulted in having Peters Adeyemi, and also had issues where it took about 4 years before that was resolved. And then the next election, which is Ayuba Ajero, we also had this similar problem. What we need to look at is how are elections conducted? Are there already agreements put in place? The labor movement, I know, we were not based on whether zoning, where you are from, your ethnic background. The most important thing was that who is competent enough to lead us. But if in the current realities, that is what we are faced with, whatever is agreed upon should be enforced. But I've always believed that whoever is the best, we should put our best foot forward. And I still think that it was the fallout of that election was not properly managed. And that is why we are having these issues right now.
Okay, Comrade Esele, thank you very much for the position that you've put forward. And I'm sure Comrade John will want to respond to that. As much as, let's take a look at one of the areas raised in the communique issued at the end of the inaugural delegates conference. There was an urgent need for a rebirth of the organized labor in order to recreate a movement capable of fulfilling its potentials to Nigerian workers, masses, and Nigeria. What exactly has the NSO been doing all these days, if not the same potential that is being pushed or canvassed now by the new center? What exactly does the movement or labor movement stand for the Nigerian worker and masses?
You know, Blessing, when I was asked to come on this program, I considered whether I should come because I'm involved in efforts to try to resolve the problem. And I didn't want to make a pronouncement that will be seen as being antagonistic to the people who want to pull out of the NSC. But the facts of the matter are that we can't build organizations, we can't build democracy if we do not accept the will of the majority. I was fully an active participant as former General Secretary of the NSC at the 2015 election of the NSC. And the aborted one, the first, after the delegates conference was to have conducted the election, and in the process it was disrupted. The leadership of the industrial unions bent over backward to accommodate our comrades who are now saying they are forming a new center. The president, who was a candidate to on the floor, said he wanted to step down for another candidate, that is Ajero, so that he can contest for deputy president. Ideally, the rules, the electoral rules did not allow that. But the unions decided that for the sake of peace, the sake of carrying everybody along, this should be allowed. So there was a vote, and Congress, being the highest organ that can amend its rules, decided to amend the laws to allow Achese, who is the president of Nupeng, to step down from being a candidate for president, team up with Ajero, and contest for deputy president. At the end of all of this, election took place and they lost. Now, irrespective of whatever permutation we may make, is a clear setback for the labor movement in the country if we again divide into small groups. As the last strike which the NSC organized showed, the government will be very willing to play divide and rule when they see that your house is not in order. And that was part of why, even though our colleagues did not participate in the election, in the strike, when it was time to discuss with government, the government brought them as a way of antagonizing the people who defied the government to go on strike. And the workers need to realize that they have to find a way of checking their leadership so that the personal ambition of individual leaders make us to lead the entire workers astray. But going back to the point you made, I think that the umbrella which we've had since 1978 has been effective in terms of accommodating different ideas. I came to the labor movement at the beginning of '87 when there were tendency politics, or what you call ideological politics, between the so-called progressives and the so-called Democrats. But what this resulted in is that when organ meetings of the NSC are held, you have very robust argument and debates on issues before decisions are taken. Unfortunately, after the Oshomole leadership and after the first tenure of Umar, these things started changing, not for the best. And the current situation is a manifestation of, as Excellent said, of some of the things that happened during the 2011 election. But be that as it may, I think what the veterans and other well-wishers of this movement are trying to do is to appeal to colleagues, not...
Before we start doing the appeal.
Again, Cromwell Peter Selle made a point that the labor movement is beginning to show manifestations of cantankerous or rancorous elections. You had that, when Omar, was in office, or was about to leave office, and now you are having it again with Waba. From your experience in the labor movement, why is it that elections have become rather competitive in the NLC?
Well, like all democratic organizations, these things, if they're not properly managed, can result in this type of situation. When Oshomole was now let's just take the issue of leadership on the basis of sectors, private sector, public sector. In the history of the NSC, this has not been a defining factor. Even though you had an interchange in leadership between public sector and private sector after the first three presidents of the NSC. Adams, who was from the textile union, a predominantly private sector union, emerged as a president after a lot of underground negotiations by the various industrial unions. And his selling point was that his union, the textile union, was one of the best organized during that period. And he was competent in terms of the management of his union, and there were achievements that the union had made, which everybody could see. In the forum to the last election, the 2011 election of the NSC, the NUT president tried to midwife some form of consensus so that you don't have the type of problems that we have now. But the effort to have a consensus in such a way that only one candidate emerged didn't succeed. And this is not something that is foreign, because when Adams was living as president of the NSC, 5 candidates emerged and wanted to be president. And the leadership of the secretariat, that is the president and myself as general secretary, met with the 5 people and said, look, we can't afford our 5 strongest affiliates all wanting to be president, because at the end of the day, it meant that 4 would be out. Therefore, you need to talk among yourself, and through the process of give and take, reduce your number. And that process led to the whittling down to only 2 candidates. Umar and Fidelis Ede, who was from the Nigerian Civil Service Union. So we have had election in the NSC virtually all through, from 1981, after the Ibadan 1978 inaugural conference, in 1981 in Kano, because at a point it was every 3 years before it changed to 4 years. Ojeli of Nigeria Civil Service Union, even though he was a deputy to Sumonu, contested against him. And elections were won and lost. In Enugu in 1984, there was a contest after the president of Nupeng, who was deputy to Sumonu, and who was seen as the apparent the successor to Sumonu, was promoted upstairs by his management. The industrial unions rallied round Chiroma, who was also a deputy president, and he contested against somebody from the NPA then. And there was, the results were declared, and we didn't have a process of people going back and saying they are going to form a new union. In 1988, in Benin, of course, given the rigorous fight of the NSC against the structural adjustment program of the government then, and the fact that the Babangida administration had felt that the NSC had been a thorn on its flesh, they wanted to effect a change of leadership. And when they couldn't succeed, it then created the situation when there was crisis, and then they took over. And everybody could see the handwriting of government there. But 10 months after, in 1988, in December 1988, when the NSC, which the government had proscribed and appointed Michael Gukoya as a sole administrator, now came on, now had to do a new election. The two contending groups met and agreed that, okay, we've learned our lessons. The government will always intervene if they see that there's a crack. Therefore, we will do this thing by a process of give and take. And the two political tendencies within the group converge around late Bafiawa as president. So the point that needs to be made is that the NSA have had one of the strong points we had made as trade unions is that we are perhaps one of the most democratic organizations. And our current leaders need to appreciate where we are coming from and stop making comments that make us look ridiculous, and sometimes on the basis of half-truths, because I've had half-truths being said.
All right.
That, for example, that it was the military that forced us into one center. This is not true. Because, like I said, Apena Declaration in 1975 led to the formation of the NSC before government intervened to reorganize.
All right, Comrade Oda, solidarity forever. The union make us strong. How strong that is still going to be from this moment is what we're trying to look at. Let's go over to Lagos. Comrade Esele, it would appear that these cracks had been long in coming. But before we come to you, we'll go on this break to bring some messages, and we'll take a look at personalities versus building strong institutions like movements for labor.
Certainly, Ajunwa is the Olympic champion.
We did it before, and we can do it again with the new strategy through the first National Grassroots Sports Festival scheduled for Abuja, Nigeria from 22nd to 29th April 2017 to prepare Nigeria to win medals in international sporting events. NTA, the largest television network in Africa, is the broadcast partner. For sponsorship, contact the Chairman Chief Coordinator on 0809 647 0111 or Mukta on 080-330-20855. Email info@grassrootssportsfestival.com. grassrootssports.com. The Grassroots Sports Festival is endorsed and in partnership with the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports Development. Join us.
I banned my wife not to give me fast food. Now she has turned to Mama Put.
Hey!
My own is even better. My children are like one. Tea and bread in the morning. Tea and bread in the afternoon. Under hot sun. Tea and bread when they want to go to bed.
I told Shelly, can she cook? She said yes, she can cook. Good and fine. I bet her. She gave me the cost. I gave her 2,000 naira. After several hours, she gave her, she cooked palm oil for me to eat. So I never know.
This week on your award-winning comedy series, Professor John Bull, starring Kanayo Okanayo, Mercy Johnson, Queen Wokoye, Funky Malam, Ime Bishop.
Go to Mama Put and buy food for him. Put it in the freezer. Automatically it becomes homemade food.
Caroline.
Professor John Bull, this Tuesday and Friday, 8:30 to 9 p.m. on NTA Network, International, and Star Times.
Over and out.
Welcome to the new speed of life.
NTA Properties Investment Company Limited, a subsidiary of the Nigerian Television Authority, specializes in creating comfort in all areas of life, such as real estate investments, that is, land, houses, and office spaces, mass leasing, savings and loan scheme, household items and car loans, and so much more. Other information and entertainment services include Property in Style, a TV program that airs on the network service of the NTA, and also Property Connect, a nationwide magazine. Our priority is to bridge poverty gaps and sustain quality welfare of our clients. Partner with us and watch us help you grow. Pay us a visit today at the NTA headquarters permanent site, Area 11 Garki, Abuja, or our Lagos office at number 15 Awolowo Road. For more information, visit our website on www.ntaproperties.com.ng, or you can email us on ntap2000@yahoo.com. Call us on 080-2316-3474 or 080-6939-5185 or 070-3189-0555. NTA Properties Investment Company Limited, the much needed help at your doorstep.
All right, welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Just before we went on a short break, my colleague Blessing was indicating that we're going over to Lagos Network Center for another question to Comrade Peter Esele. But before we do that, let's introduce another guest who's just joined us in the Abuja studios. He's Comrade Shehu Sani. Comrade Shehu Sani, of course, is a distinguished senator in the 8th Assembly. Distinguished Senator, a pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. What we're discussing straight away has to do with the issue in the Nigerian labor movement. Apparently, the center is split. So there's a new labor center, in addition to the NLC and, of course, the 2UC, which came on stream in 2005. What's your take on what is happening? Is it good for the labor movement? Is it good for the Nigerian workers? Is it good for the country? Is it in consonance with Chapter 4 of the Constitution, Freedom of Association?
Thank you very much once again. First of all, every nation needs a labor movement that will protect the rights of workers, a labor movement that will stand for a cause that is just for everyone. In Nigeria, over the years, the Nigerian Labour Congress has always represented the interest of the common people, particularly the working class. And it has been so from the period of military dictatorship up to the democratic era at this very time. But the unfortunate thing was the new development we have seen, where internal crisis threatens to seriously undermine the essence, the importance, and the relevance of that very important organization. And we can, in very strong terms, attribute the success of our democratic journey after 1999 to the position of labor. But what we have seen is quite unfortunate in the sense that without a labor movement, Nigerian workers will be left vulnerable, and also government and its activities will be left unchecked, because in most times, Nigerians rely and resort to labor to defend and stand for their right. But what we have seen over the years seriously undermines that relevance. And the unfortunate thing is that it is not coming from the outside, even though you cannot rule out outside interference. It is from the inside. And you can see from the last general strike, whereby a labor that is feared, a labor that is known to have stand by its word, say it and live by it, and see it effective. In the past, when they declared general strike and civil disobedience campaign, you see a whole nation complying and for a cause, and then forcing a government to comply or to conform to what the workers or the people want. But the last general strike was an unfortunate situation. For those of us from a civil rights background who always associated with labor, felt to a certain level demoralized, but not to the very point of giving up on labor. We have seen strikes not being very effective in most states, to the point that establishments, the authorities themselves, have discovered these weaknesses and no more felt threatened. So I think it is in the interest of democracy, even the government itself, to have a labor movement that is united, standing for a cause, and for all Nigerians.
All right, distinguished Senator, we'll come back to you. Let's return to Lagos. I was going to ask Comrade Peter earlier on about a position where we found labor today. Senator Sani just made mention of those years when you hear of labor movement, it is to actually go with such trepidation. But today, what do we have? Is it a case of having to build individuals other than those strong institutions that will help governance and also the workers generally?
I think based on what Sani just said, he talked about our challenges coming from within. We're having internal problems, yes. And I'll go back a little bit when he made reference to the last general strike. And the last general strike was the way it is because there was no unity among the Nigerian Labour Congress wanted to go ahead. The Trade Union Congress also didn't want to go ahead, And then you have the petroleum workers, Pengasin and Nupeng. Ordinarily in the TUC, the way we operate is that the industrial union in that sector will first of all make a report to the Labour Center to say this is what they think are the challenges in the oil and gas. And based on their report, that is what the Labour Center will act on. And when the TUC got his report from Pengasin on the need that it is time that this subsidy need to go, and the TUC needed to debate it, and after an extensive debate, and they said, okay, let's let it go. And then the NSC wanted to still go ahead, but there was still that unity of purpose. That it was at the last minute that the TUC said, based on the recommendation from the oil workers, they think they don't want to go ahead with it. But that does not mean that there is no unity or there is no sense of purpose. Then the next challenge we are facing right now is the challenge of values. Every day our values are going down. I have a job, and that job qualifies me, first of all, to be a member of the union. Without having a job, I can't be Pengasin president, for example. But what you have now is that we need to have the best of us to represent us. But what we have is the reverse now. You have certain people who believe that they need to hold the office to protect their jobs. So because of that, what you have is that you are now building the individual interest. Is now higher than that of the institutional interest. That is a challenge that we are also dealing with now. If you have a job and you don't win an election, go back to your work, because the office of the union is a service. You want to render service. And people said, okay, we don't want you to render us this service. Do Thanksgiving and go back to your work, but you still have your job. But what we have now is that due to the perks in that office, the fame that comes with that office, and the various attractions that come with that office, people now forget their primary responsibility. The primary responsibility is that when you pay your dues to the union, that qualifies you to be a member of the union. That qualifies you to hold the office. But once the election has taken place, and you don't need to hold that office, you go back to your work. Another aspect of it is that you also now have industrial union amending their constitution. I was TUC president, and they came up and said, let's amend our constitution to a 4-year tenure. NSC has a 4-year tenure. TUC has a 3-year tenure. Pengasin even had, formerly we used to have a 2-year tenure. And the reason why I said, no, I'm not going to do a 4-year tenure. You can ask somebody coming after me to start with the 4-year tenure. That was how it was reduced. I said, if somebody, for example, you have to be president for 6 years, you have to be deputy president for 6 years, and it's also possible that before then you were a trustee for another 6 years, TUC does 6 years, NSC does for 4 years. At the end of the day, what do you have? You virtually work, you are expected to work for 30 years. You're virtually spending 20 years in the union. The only people that are expected to stay up to 30 years in the union are the secretary generals. John was giving us a background and history of the movement because John was the Secretary General and is an employee of the Nigerian Labour Congress. A Secretary General of TUC is an employee of the Trade Union Congress. So they are the archives, they are the library, and they are what we call the barracks. They will always remain. Those who are holding offices, whether as TUC President, PENGASI President, NSC President, are political office holders. And they have a tenure, they need to also go. The movement must be dynamic. And that is where we are having fundamental challenges now. The movement must be dynamic. You can't be amending constitution so that you want to be NSC president or you want to be TUC president. It also happened during my tenure, where somebody had to amend the constitution, because his own constitution, so that he will be qualified to now contest for the office of the TUC president. And these whole things are gathering steam, and people are now looking at, they are forgetting the overriding interest of why we have a movement, which is first and foremost to defend and protect the interests of our workers.
Well, Comrade Peter Isela, I stayed with you at the Lagos Network Center. The argument has been made by the progenitors of the new Labour Center that perhaps we have to look at the legal status of the existing centers. Part of the argument, according to them, is that the NLC appears to have no registration certificate or license, and that the TUC actually has a license issued by the registrar, which is 001. What's your reaction to this?
Yes, we have. One of the things that we did in our own case was to make sure that every process, that's why I'm also discussing, I had some conversation with those on the other side right now, and I said, do you guys, various process, what the law says, and they are telling me that they conform to what the law says. But I don't want to go into the fact that whether NS is registered or not. But actually TUC has 001, that is what is on our certificate. But I don't want the Nigerian Labour Congress to be destroyed. I don't want the Nigerian Labour Congress to be undermined. And what I've always said, right now we have Ajero, we have Igwe, we have Ayuba Waba. Whether they like it or not, the Nigerian Labour Congress is bigger than all of these individuals. They are tenured, they are going to come and they are going to go. And it is my own wish the Nigerian Labour movement will continue to grow stronger.
Comrade John Noda.
Yeah, I think this just a clarification. I was really surprised when Ajero was credited with that statement that the NSC doesn't have a registration certificate. Of course, I was General Secretary for, I think, about 12 or so years, and the registration certificate is framed on the General Secretary's office, as well as the President of the NSC. And Ajero, for 4 years, was Deputy President of the NSC, so he definitely must have seen that certificate. Why he decided to raise that as an issue, I don't know. However, I think the point that he probably want to say was that following our strike, the general strike against fuel price increase in 2003, President Obasanjo was very angry and wanted to dismantle the NSC and went to the Senate, to the National Assembly, and said the NSC, we should amend the trade union law in such a way that any two unions can form a center. And this was a grand design to weaken the NSC. And the leadership of the NSC, then led by Adams, now discussed and had active interaction with members of the National Assembly in the two chambers. And eventually, we defeated President Obasanjo in his bid to weaken the NSC and the center. I say defeated because instead of the two unions which could form a federation, the National Assembly brought this to 12. And it was decided that any other person that met these 12 unions can then form a center. However, that the NSC as it is, registered since 1978 remains. So the NSC don't need any new certificate. And when the registrar of trade unions actually said we should bring our certificate so that they could change it, we said no. Because as far as we were concerned, nothing has happened from the 2004 amendment to the act that warranted us to change our certificate. So I think that for the information of Nigerians, the Office of the Registrar of Trade Unions regulates the activities of the trade union. And for you to practice as an industrial union, you have to be registered. To practice as a center, you have to be registered. So it is important for Nigerians to know that the NSC has its certificate, which is valid and authenticated from 1978 till now.
What is the number of the certificate?
The NSC, it was the number one, the only center as of that time. And so if you go to the NSC today, you will see the certificate signed by the then Registrar of Trade Union.
Still number one, like TUC has?
So TUC,
maybe one of the numbers has to be amended. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if the TUC, former president says their certificate is 001 and the NLC, because that's the argument being made by the new center. They are saying that, look, the NLC, according to them, that the NLC doesn't appear to have a legal basis. And that if it had a legal basis, then no certificate might have been issued to a new center as 001. The new number would have been subsequent to the first certificate issued.
Yeah, but Kingsley, what I'm saying is that Ajero haven't served as deputy president for 4 years. Ought to know better. And what I think he is doing is just feeding Nigerians with information that are not true. The amendment to the Trade Union Act, which was passed by the National Assembly and signed by President Obasanjo, didn't have anything to do with the stature of NSC as a center. So the question of is legality or legitimacy didn't arise. And if it was there, why did Ajero seek to be president of the NSC?
All right, Comrade Oda, thank you very much. Let's return to Comrade Shehu Sani. Senator, distinguished Senator, you're wearing two hats this morning. I mean, the first statement you made indicated, you're concerned about what's going on. You can see there are issues pertaining to the legality of the entities and so on and so forth, what requirements need to be met. In your opinion, is enough being done to, as it were, smoothing the rough edges or streamline the centers so that they can, in unity, approximate the powers and functions and roles that you had earlier outlined?
Yeah, well, naturally, if someone is aggrieved, certainly, and he has a point to make, he can use any weapon at his disposal to strengthen his argument. And now, what I'm saying here is that the crisis in the Nigerian labor could better be resolved if we can have a honest and impartial intervention by veteran labor leaders who should see that this is part of their legacy and stewardship and their baby that is now in crisis. And they need to step forward and address this very important issue, except if they are part of the problem. But if they are not, certainly they have a role to play. And there is no one that can do this other than people who are concerned. And like I've said earlier, in any country of the world where there is a serious assault on democracy, you see the civil society and the labor movement in the forefront. And what I expected to see, the kind of conflicts and arguments and distractions that I may, while I'd love to see in the label, perhaps it's redefining the ideological perception of what is supposed to be. For example, if this one said we should move to the left, the other one said we should move communist, and the other one said we move socialist. This is how I want it to see. But the implosion is a serious minus to the label, but naturally also. This crisis is not peculiar to Nigeria. In most countries of the world, or in some countries of the world, you have their labor movement facing this kind of issues. But now you have a political leadership that perhaps appreciates the value and the essence of labor, and now see the need for them to come together and work. But naturally, the political establishment in Nigeria, right from the past, and even the one which we are working on, many will be appeased that we now don't have a weapon that will stand against our policies. And if you have standing for the people, it is then that the people will be rest assured that policies and programs of government will be geared towards their interest.
I was wondering, comrades, Shehu Sani, but is all of this in sync with what some commentators have also described as the erosion of the potency of civil society in the current political dispensation? That we have seen a gradual attenuation of the force and power of civil society?
Well, the role of the civil society during the military era is a role that is geared towards establishing the system, dislodging military and restoring democracy and civil liberties back to Nigeria. But the role after 1999 is seeing how the game could be played according to the rule. But the problems we are having with the new role of the civil society is that in some ways, many of its values and funds were defanged in most cases, because they now have a role of having to engage governments. And when it comes to the process of engagement, you don't want to be seen to be confrontational. And it is not the civil society that can bring labor together. It is the labor that can bring civil society together, because it is one organized body that has a history longer than even that of civil society. We have seen it during the military era, where you have labor civil society coalition, and even during the oil strikes in the last 8 to 9 years. So if the labor is in crisis now, there will be no shade to which the civil society could come together. Now civil society are engaged in different things. Like I've listened to Professor Lejadu some times ago when he said that now the civil society don't want to be seen to be confrontational. They have divided themselves into the one involved in transportation, the one involved in HIV, the one involved in maternal health. And now the basic issue of standing up to unpopular, anti-democratic, anti-progressive, and anti-people policies is seriously being undermined. During our time in the civil society, our major focus is how do we mobilize the citizenry against the government, dislodge the government, and restore democracy. And for that, many people were paid the price for it. But for now, the civil society has its own problems. Now, the labor that's supposed to bring the civil society together is also faced with this kind of problem. So it is time for labor veterans to come together, sit down, and see how they can talk to all comrades for this movement not to really die.
All right. From Festus Akinboyewa again, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Crisis-ridden labor movement will not be able to advance the welfare of Nigerian workers.
All right, there we have this from Dele Jack Solomon Medj. That's Dele Mejabi. It says, my distinguished moderators, we are simply Mr. and Mrs. Good morning. What we have is factional labor union. I hope soon Nigeria will have unity labor union. And but just a point of correction, industrial unions make up the centers in the first instance. So that's the industrial unions now coagulate to become the Center or the Federation of Unions.
All right, another one from Ibrahim Tudu said, welcome to the new NLC, if only it means new dawn in labor activism, new direction, new initiatives, and workers' emancipation.
And Shitu 10, that's Change to Progress, is posing a question. Is it after every election that former leaders, that's the of the labor movement, will have to set up a reconciliation committee? Something is fundamentally wrong with us. All right, now those are some of the tweets that we are taking in the meantime. John Oda, let's get your reaction. You were itching to respond to what Comrade Shehu Sani was saying, but in addition to whatever response you had earlier on, you were talking about the moves towards reconciliation, the role being played by former labor leaders, and what to expect.
Yeah. I was actually going to say that the comments of our distinguished senator has been very constructive, and the viewers out there, especially our past labor leaders, will see this as an added impetus to try to find a way of bringing our comrades together so that the organization that have been nurtured in the last 40 years will not disintegrate in their very eyes. And to that effect, actually today, Tuesday, in Lagos, the veterans are meeting, and the issue of the current impasse is one of the things they are going to try to address, to go back to. They have been on this since the last 20 or so months. But talking behind, I think all agree that they will not be tired till they eventually have this issue sorted out. Because the problem with the efforts now is that there will be consequences. They will spill over to jurisdictional wars in the affiliate industrial unions, and it will make industrial unions weaker and less able to defend the rights of the workers in the workplaces. And
sorry, what do you mean? Are you saying that if the existing issues are resolved, that this
are not resolved are not resolved? There will be consequences, right, because they will spill over to even how the industrial unions themselves organize, and there will be attempts to do poaching of members from one sector to the other. All of these are some of the ugly incidences that clearly we don't want to return back to the labor movement. And that's why it's very important that we find an amicable solution in such a way that our colleagues who want to leave the NSC will find their way back to the natural base, because the Electricity Union and the Nupeng Petroleum Union have played a very active role in the building of the present NSC. Like I indicated earlier, the then president of Nupeng, who was deputy president to Sumonu, was going to be the second, if he had the opportunity of being outstanding for elections, may end up being the president of the NSC. After that, we all knew the contribution that people like Franco Kori made, and Franco Kori was leader of the Nupeng Union to our quest for democracy in this country. After that, there was Akilaja, who is a member of the House of Representatives and who was General Secretary of the Nupeng Union and was Deputy President of the NSC. Then there was Honorable Peter Patterson, who is also right now a member of the House of Representatives and who was a trustee of the NSC. If you go to the Electricity Union, Precious Kilikalu was a deputy to Adams when the NSC reclaimed Issa back in 1999. For the first tenure, he became ill, and so he couldn't continue in the second tenure. And with this type of rich history, we cannot afford the house disintegrating.
All right, yeah, Comrade Order, I was just going to ask Blessing, let's get the comment of Comrade Peter Esele. Comrade Peter Esele, at the beginning, your first statement was to the effect that water will always find its level. Again, you have also talked about the creeping invidious factors in the elections that the NLC or the labor movement, tends to conduct these days. From what Comrade John Oda has indicated, from what do you think is likely to play out? Can the labor veterans win over both sides? And if they did, would it just be on the basis of mere persuasion, or there would need to be some further interrogation of the constitution, say, of the NLC, as well as the requirements for contesting for offices, which, of course, would have been seen as factors provoking the current crisis?
I think they need to also interrogate their constitution, and then for the fact that Igwe, who is also president of NUPENG, and who is also, I think, Ajero's deputy in the new Labour Federation, and the fact that we both find ourselves in the same sector happens to be somebody I can always talk to. My last conversation with him was that they don't have issues with Ayuba being the current president. He thinks that they've moved beyond that. But his own was that it was all more of movement without motion, that each of the meetings that he went to, and whatever is agreed or deliberated upon, nobody wants to do anything about it. And at the end of the day, their feeling was that they were not being properly treated. And I think there is room that the NSC can accommodate whatever grievances that they have. I believe that NSC can accommodate it. And I also have a conversation with John. I didn't know John was coming on this program. John and I had a conversation over the telephone a couple of weeks back, still on this same issue, because I felt the labor movement is better off with Nigerian Labour Congress being one strong body, and then the TUC also being on its own part, and you have that partnership that we have now. But having a third leg in that partnership, I think that that would be worrisome, because the third leg, if the third leg is coming up out of grievances, out of disagreement, you can tell as well that whenever there's going to be a strike, whenever there's going to be a challenge or policy disagreement, you are going to have that third leg based on his grievances, based on that anger. We want to undermine the NSC. So I think there's a window for them to still take it up, but how big that window is right now is what I'm afraid of, because I think that the guys are really, really upset, and one of them told me that they are ready to wait it out, that if it's going to be 20 years for them to be recognized fully, they are ready to wait it out. But I think the veterans who are meeting today in Lagos have a lot of work on their hand. We need to do as much as possible to make sure the union becomes one. And then number two, we also need to look at our constitution. We also need to look at the quality of people that we are electing into the Central Working Committee. We also need to look at the quality and caliber of people in the National Executive Council. We're having what I call serious governance issues in the labor movement. And that is something we also need to deal with. The National Executive Council is a powerful organ, and what you have now is nobody is discussing policy, nobody is discussing research the way we used to do it. And what you have is that we are now having the fallout from the Nigerian political space, whereby you have North and South, Hausa, Muslim, minority. These were not things that the labor movement was all about. It was all about ideas. I will come into a NEC meeting and I said I'm a social democrat, and I don't believe, I've never been a Marxist. And me and John will always have a conversation on that. John used to be a core socialist and Marxist, and that will always be the basis of our disagreement or of our argument. But that does not mean that John and I will not have a drink together. John and I will not have a cup of tea together, even though I'm in TUC and he's in NSC. But the basic thing is that we never forget that it is what is best for the workers that we should strive for. And once there's an agreement, we both, if his point of argument wins, we both go on the street and defend that point of argument. If mine wins, he also needs to defend the point of argument that is mine.
Comrade, okay, Kingsley, we're going to...
Comrade Peter Isele, former president of the Trade Union Congress, I would like to thank you for being part of our conversation this morning. And just before you respond, to indicate that if you say John Oda, you say Warsaw still is a Marxist, he's lost his beard now. Probably that came after 1989, following the headlong collapse of communism. Thank you very much, Peter Isele, for being with us this morning.
Senator of course, your closing thoughts. The ultimate aim is just to have the interests of the masses, the workers, and generally a group that will add value to democracy today.
Yeah, my closing thought is a general call on the labor leaders to know that their relevance and importance in the society is based on having a strong labor union, the platform that brought them to spotlight and the platform that remains their own component of strength. And my call to the veteran labor leaders who are working to bring this union back together is that they have a work to do to save their legacy and to save the Nigerian workers. We need Nigerian Labour Congress to stand for us, even those of us who are in government. We also need the Nigerian Labour workers to serve as a beacon and a hope and a pillar of democracy for Nigeria. And I call on the aggrieved within the Labour to compromise, make consensus in the interest of that very union that became the reason for which they are known with. That's all what I can say now.
All right, thank you very much, distinguished Senator Shosani. Yes, still the Marxists, or where do we go from here?
In addition to what our comrade and distinguished senator have said, none of the individuals, whether Comrade Ayuba, who is from the medical sector, or Ajero, whose base is being completely undermined with the discourse who do not want unions, or Achese in the petroleum sector, where offshoring and a whole lot of efforts to reduce employment as a result of the situation of the petroleum sector. None of them can go it alone. They have challenges that they need a strong and united NSC to face together. And they must put their individual egos behind and allow the interests of the working people of this country to be the guiding force. So we hope that with the discussions that are going on behind the scene, that we will see in no distant future a resolution of this unfortunate crisis in such a way that will come back.
That would be most wonderful to see
to one single
union with forthright movement. Comrade John Oda, former Secretary, Nigerian Labour Congress, thank you so much for your insights on the program this morning.
Thank you.
To our companion segment, which is sports, we'll take on that.
Just before we take sports, we also would like to thank Comrade Shehu Sani, distinguished senator of the Federal Republic. Thank you for being part of our discussion this morning.
Appreciate.
Okay, all right, now, talking sports, Cristiano Ronaldo wins the 2016 FIFA Best Player Award, and back home, Enugu Rangers take on FC Ifeanyi in a Charity Cup match taking place on Wednesday. Details of these stories from our sports desk.
And the best FIFA Men's Player of 2016 is Cristiano Ronaldo.